end, but welcome to the Flood Early Warning System Workshop. Thank you for joining us online and thank you for joining in person. I just wanted to welcome you all to the COG campus. I'm Erin Blackman. I'm in the Environment and Development Department and working closely with the project partners who will be presenting today on the Integrating Transportation Stormwater Infrastructure Project, specifically talking about flood early warning piece of that project. So with that, I will turn it over to Jerry Cotter.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. How many people do we have online, Erin? 45. Cool. Awesome. We're here to talk this morning about the Transportation Stormwater Infrastructure Project. And I'm hoping, oh, got to use this one. Okay. Sorry. Still not working. Okay, fantastic. You know, before we start talking in depth about the TSI project, let's talk a little bit about the threats that we're facing from flooding. And yes, North Texas does experience extreme flooding, and we do have much damage and occasional fatalities here. Growth and development drives some of those flooding issues. We're adding across Texas about 1,100 people per day since 2000. The Dallas-Fort Worth area gets 350 to 400, and this TSI area that we're talking about gets about 130 people per day to the area. We've seen significant increases in the developed area. And I'm sure that some of you in these communities out west you're representing these communities have seen that growth and development. How many here have seen the growth out west and the increase in the number of folks moving out there, the neighborhoods and all? How does that occur currently? It occurs really neighborhood by neighborhood. Developers come in and they develop a neighborhood, and then they go and they develop the next neighborhood. But there's not really comprehensive planning across neighborhoods. Flood risk should be looked at on the watershed basis. So each stream, if a community crosses a portion of that stream, and other communities are upstream, the growth and development in those upstream communities will impact the downstream community. Right now, there's a hodgepodge of information out there to use for flood science. TSI is going to address or is addressing that hodgepodge and providing a great deal of new data and information that can be used to better manage growth and development. Current development practices, when we create new impervious surfaces, rooftops, parking lots, roadways, when we build neighborhoods up close to the streams, that increases the flood damage level or the flood potential level 25 to 35%. And how do we know that? Well, we actually looked at that in detail within the TSI study and simulated new growth and development in these undeveloped areas. And that's what we saw was a 25 to 35% increase in the threat level. Extreme storms, we definitely get those here. As you move up Texas, they're not quite as severe as in the coastal areas, but we still get some extreme flooding. In 2015, we had a storm just south of Dallas, dropped 25 inches in 24 hours. Even turned over a couple of locomotive engines. That's how much flow. Emergency dam operations at Richland Chambers, that storm could have easily have hit in the TSI footprint. We had Tropical Storm Norma on the Elm Fork, produced a 200,000 CFS discharge on the Elm Fork. That could have hit in the TSI footprint. We capture many storms in the flood control reservoirs that provide mitigation for the DFW area, and many of those storms exceed what we designed infrastructure for. In 2015, we had so much rainfall in this Upper Trinity area. We had between 20 and 30 inches. That's the average. We had point rainfalls in the 46 inches. That filled up all the flood mitigation dams and went into surcharge operations or emergency operations. There were evacuations that had to take place. And fortunately, we did have a system associated with those dams where we could see ahead of time what those inundation footprints would look like. That's a flood warning system. And we're able to use that data to manage those evacuations. There was of course, Harvey, which couldn't happen up here, but we're talking a city of 7.5 million people that was 60% underwater, days and days. One image that sticks in my mind that I can't get over is of a elderly care facility where the elderly were sitting in the main living area in their chairs, knitting and doing other activities with water up to their waist in the chairs. There was nowhere they could go, nothing they could do. Those threats are very real. The Blanco River in 2015, we lost 13 people, 2 families, and 1 set of grandparents, and the really tragic 2 6-year-olds and a 4-year-old. Of course, the Guadalupe River flooding down this past July, we lost around 130 people and many, many children in that flood. Some folks think, well, we couldn't get a Harvey here, and that is actually true. We couldn't get the flash flooding that they get down in the hill country. That's not true. We can experience that here. We're going to show a video next, and that video is going to start here in Arlington, and it's going to show a flood in 2010 right over here on Rush Creek. And it's going to basically tour around the state, showing that every community experiences these flooding incidents. And it's going to wind up back here in Dallas as well. So it is going to hit North Texas. It's going to hit other parts of the state. Why did that flooding occur? All of that flooding you see in the video is triggered by growth and development. It's either developing without adequate scientific data to manage that development, or developing and upstream development occurred, which increased the flood risk. So we have basically growth and development driving this flooding that you're going to see in here. And go ahead and let's kick that off.
Longview Police Fire EMS?
Yes, my name's Brian. I'm in Wimberley. I'm not Loma. I'm on Loma Vista. A house just went by with the river, and there's a person in it with a spotlight.
I went over here to check up on my friend, and I'm talking about the water was risen up to my neck. Like, that was very scary.
We saw the boat come by first, and we took the first chance we could get out of there.
So you were pulled off your rooftop?
Yes, into a boat. Yes, that's how high the water is.
It was around 3 in the morning, and we saw outside that everything was flooded. Everything.
Let me know when I can talk again. So TSI, what is it? It's a $10 million study that looks at the 8 western counties of the DFW area to actually look beyond the neighborhood level, to look regionally at what needs to be done in terms of stormwater planning and emergency preparedness planning. There is opportunities for economies of scale. When one of you go out and set out to build a system, you've got to fund that full system. But when you come together as communities, there's 85 communities out there, 8 counties. When you come together, you achieve economies of scale to where that cost is divided over many entities, and your burden is significantly reduced. You have the opportunity through TSI to see what drives increased flooding, what parts of growth and development, and then you can take that data, and if you choose, you can pass regulations, development regulations that will help make your communities more resilient into the future. This gives you an opportunity to take a leadership role in your region to drive what products, what information is brought to the table for you to use in the future. It's going to bring stormwater infrastructure, but our focus today is to talk about emergency preparedness. So we won't go into that. It's bringing partnerships and resources. This is led by the North Central Texas Council of Governments, and that's appropriate. They're the regional planning authority that helps bring the 85 cities, the 8 counties together to have these conversations. We're not dictating anything. We're asking you, what do you want? What can we bring for you? And this brings money, but it brings the Texas Water Development Board. Any projects identified will be put into the state flood plan, and that gives you the potential for funding support that does not have to come from your community. The General Land Office is involved in funding this, TxDOT, FEMA, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. One of our partners is the Tarrant Regional Water District, the Upper Trinity Regional Water District, TRA. We have several universities involved, Texas A&M AgriLife, UTA, Water Engineering Research Center, and that center brings more than just UTA. And as Dr. Fang will mention later, we have collaborations with universities across the state to bring other researchers here when needed. But that research drives flood science forward. We have a tremendously influential and excellent resource in our consulting firms that we have, Friesen Nichols, HAP, Highland Economics, West Consultants, and others. We have access. This is going to bring you access to funding that you may not even know you have access to. TSI, as I said, it gives you a seat at the table so that you can influence these future outcomes. We're going to bring to you really quality science and data. Everyone here realizes how fast technology is advancing. Just look at your cell phone and in the capabilities that you now have. I wear a watch that tells me that I'm not doing so well. But technology is also influencing how we manage flood science, and it's really affected those determinations. And this project is going to modernize all of those benefits for you. We are fortunate to bring other partners like the National Weather Service, the U.S. Geological Survey. Those guys, you see them in movies. They're like rock stars, and they're here to help and to bring the products and data, and also to listen to you about what you need going forward in the future. So we've got Dr. Schroeder here from the National Weather Service, and we've got Chief Blickenstaff, and they'll be speaking later about some of the products that have been developed. And like I said, we basically deal with a hodgepodge of flood science data, but across the TSI footprint, we're updating and modernizing all that data, and that's all going to be available to you, not in terms of regulatory, in terms of just data that you can choose to use and inform growth and development moving forward. We had a number of meetings after these flooding events, these disasters, and we brought in representatives of the EM community, and we consistently heard that the information that they need is fragmented. It's spread across many websites. They have to spend hours building briefings. What if we can consolidate all that information together for you and simplify the process of building those briefings? We have a lot of non-specific warning data that's sent out. Because of weather forecasts and our uncertainties, we can't always say it's going to flood exactly here or exactly there. But we do have a great deal of data and new science that will help us and buy us more time to provide those warnings. Back early in my career, back in the 2000 to 2015, at the Army Corps of Engineers, we built a flood forecasting system for the dams across the country. We operate the Corps operates about 700 structures across the country, all the navigation infrastructure out there. And this system was built to be able to better operate that infrastructure. In 2015, we were able to forecast what was going to happen at our dams. And these dams have drainage areas of 1,000 square miles, 700 square miles. The dams themselves are 30 square miles, 40 square miles of water surface area. We were forecasting those dams with this new technology to within 1/10 of a foot, days out. And so when we had to, evacuations had to be ordered, we had very accurate data about who was going to be impacted and who was not going to be impacted. That system is not macro enough to forecast within DFW. So if you're going to have any forewarning, any type of a system, you're going to have to build it. And we're here to help you. But to help you, we need you to engage and tell us what you want, what we can do for you. We are creating a master plan for flood warning system, but it's not site specific. It's more like you went to a cafeteria and you're choosing the dishes. You'll choose out of this master plan what's fits your community to use. So that's being developed. Like I said, please engage and, you know, help us build this future. Let's build more resilient communities. Let's be better prepared for these disasters. We have, in the course of studying the TSI, we have actually found an area similar to the Guadalupe where there are a great many homes at risk. We brought that to the attention of the local community, but people think, well, that's something down in the hill country. No, we have those scenarios here just waiting to happen. So please engage with us. Please help us. Please support us. Please take advantage of the resources and the funding that's being brought to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Jerry. Can I get a confirmation online that y'all can hear me okay?
Yes, Matt.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so good morning. And again, thanks for making the time to come be with us. We're really excited about this project. I know me personally, you know, I've worked in a lot of different capacities, roles over the course of my career. And this is by far, I would say, the most exciting project that I've been a part of, because what I feel like it does, sort of, as Jerry mentioned, it brings together all of these different pieces of information. And I feel like it's connecting the dots. And it's saying we've got good data, we've got good flood science information, we've got good engineering, we've got a lot of smart people that understand individually how to use that. And this is integrating the flood science, but it's also going beyond that and recognizing that transportation has an extensive, you know, $1 billion+ budget just here in the region. And they have projects that are meaningful, but they're recognizing the fact that these roads are still flooding and that we can do more and we can do better. So I think all of that bringing together and then adding in the environmental, the green infrastructure piece, and figuring out how can we be more resilient in the future is key to doing this and doing it successfully, you know, across the region. My personal story, coming from, I've moved around a lot from West Texas, southern New Mexico, but ended up out in Florida for a while, in coastal Florida, which was completely different for me and somewhere I'd never even thought I would live. But I remember looking for a house. Love this area. My wife, you know, this one spot in the Gulf Coast, found a lot that we you know, fell in love with, thought it was great. And then for whatever reason, this our realtor was like, yeah, it's, you know, it's a little bit, you know, there's potential flood issues. And we were like, I didn't know, you know, there's hurricanes and this kind of looks like, so it was a realtor that was kind of informing us at the time. At that point, I wasn't in this, you know, flood community, didn't really fully understand it, wasn't in a quote unquote FEMA floodplain, all of that good stuff. So we ended up picking a lot that was, he showed us, oh, this vegetation, this grows only in these areas that are, you know, higher up. So, you know, over here, higher up in coastal Florida was, you know, an extra 10 feet or whatever. But I remember we bought that house, bought that lot. And then a few years later, sure enough, you know, home was built in that exact spot we're going to be in, and a home ended up flooding, you know, several feet of water in that home that would have, you know, been my family, my kids, all of that. So there's personal connection, and then experiencing, you know, I know the video that Jerry shared, obviously it stopped short of this current event that he talked about with the Guadalupe and the devastation in hill country, and the, you know, over 100 lives lost, including, you know, a number of small children. We understand that. I remember tracking that and just the personal connection to both the region, you know, knowing a lot of people that live there, have experienced that, talking to survivors, and then being there in Kerrville after the event and, you know, listening to the stories. We collectively can do better. And that's what really this project, and then specifically this flood warning system, is all about. So really, by the end of today, the idea is we can recognize this TSI concept, understand its proactive nature versus reacting. We can do better of getting ahead of the development because it's much more difficult to mitigate after the fact. It's a lot more cost effective in advance of it. understanding how flood warning system or FUSE, we'll talk about that today, how that fits into TSI and what the benefits are and the tools in y'all's toolbox related to that. The SOP, the master plan that we'll talk about that's been developed and is just about finished. Learn from the different public works professionals. We talked about a few that are going to present right after me. And what tools and resources are there for y'all from a resiliency standpoint. And then give you the opportunity to provide feedback as we finalize this project, move it to a completion in terms of a study, but understanding that we need you to take this forward. If these go into the state, and regional flood plans, these projects can be implemented, can be beneficial, can be utilized by you all. And so providing those resources so that you can help us to continue advancing this forward. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to show you show you the TSI website itself and the flood warning system piece of it that sits on this interactive story map. That way you know where the resources that we're talking about today either are currently sitting or are going to be sitting as this project comes to a completion. So let's see all this. So this is if you just go, all you have to do is nctcog.org/TSI. That'll take you to this landing page for TSI. This is where all the information that you need related to the study is going to be accessed, available. We've got information, current things like this workshop we're doing today, other upcoming events and things like that you can see featured here. These widgets here give a lot of other good information. There's some cool tools where you can go in if there's a known flooding hotspot, you can click on this map your watershed, identify that, we'll see that on our end, and it's just a way to keep from an inventory perspective all of these different known issues or known hotspots. The stakeholder engagement, contact information, outreach documents, different upcoming events. But the one I want to talk about today is this story map. What we're trying to do is make this as interactive as possible. So again, if you have feedback on things we can do better, related to this as we finalize this, I think that's really the goal with this. So it's broken up into, when you get to the story map, it's broken up into these 3 different categories. You've got history and context, what we're doing, and results and resources. The history and context gives a lot of the background information, kind of why are we doing this, the so what. And that's a lot of the things that Jerry talked about, but it even goes back further, and even DFW and the experience that we've had with flooding in the past, going back to the early 1900s. You had devastation you can see in downtown Fort Worth with these images here. That ultimately led to the creation of Tarrant Regional Water District, the Corps of Engineers, and a number of other groups, and the 6 lakes we have, federal lakes across the DFW area, as well as others. So that kind of gives you some of the context, and what we did, we reacted to those events. That's what we do. That's the way that funding is set up. It's not set up to be proactive. So we're kind of fighting, swimming upstream a little bit in that capacity. There's demographic information, things like that. You can see what we're projecting from a growth perspective over the next, from between now and 2070. You can just see DFW already is, has a significant population. And I would argue that these are probably underrepresenting what the end result is going to be, but you can still see this western area that we're talking about here, right over here in this Metroplex portion. Is half of the Metroplex. You can just see the dramatic increase that we're expecting just over that in the 45-year period or so. Some of this that speaks to the impacts of these core lakes. You saw this core lake was constructed. This is Lake Benbrook. Immediately dropped the peak flows over as a result of its construction. But what we're seeing is that despite the fact that created a huge benefit for the region, you can see some of these events. This was in 1922, 1949, these higher level events. Those are the ones that created some of that devastation, those pictures that you're talking about. Well, those numbers are starting to creep back up despite the fact that this is a regulated area. There's reporting that's saying the result of urbanization is the cause for this. Urbanization is the cause of these increases. among other factors. But that just shows the fact that this is happening. It's not something that it's when, it's if, it's literally happening. The example Jerry showed here earlier mentioned the Camp Mystic in North Texas. This is this Mary's Creek area in Fort Worth and Benbrook area. And you can see the growth that's happened from the left all the way to the right, and how the floodplain is continually being squeezed, if you will, and the development is happening right there in the middle. And so again, some of those homes in that cases have actually been built in the FEMA floodway, the actual area that's intended to carry that large amount of volume of water. So it gets into the hill country comparison with some of these areas is not just the depth of water, how much water, and the fact that it's like in Houston after Hurricane Harvey, there were people on their roofs. But the issue, or one of the big issues that we saw in hill country, is the velocity. So we've got a lot of those areas, these flashy watersheds where the water fills up, but it's also going fast. So it tears homes off the foundation. So you don't have the opportunity to get up on your roof. Your house is floating down the river or stream. So in some of these cases, just a matter of time. So history and context, what we're doing, and then just for the sake of time, I'll go down here to the resources part of it. So we're taking this information and data that my colleagues here from the USGS and National Weather Service will talk about. We are enhancing it, so we're providing additional detail to ultimately create these types of scenarios that are, where are the areas where we can take an existing structure. We can maybe do something here and create a more smart culvert or something that is tiered in some way to be able to then say, yeah, maybe we let the lower level, we hold back and detain in something like a detention pond or something, hold back some of that water, and then in those larger events we let it pass through this secondary culvert structure. So those are things that engineering, analysis, all of this, these are things that are projects that will come out as a result of TSI. But one of the things that we're talking about, or the feature thing today that we're talking about, is flood warning system. We have all this information, we have all this good data, it's creating good projects, but we recognize that those mitigation projects are only part of the solution. It's going to take much more than that. It's going to take a menu of options, a menu of possibilities to really address fully this problem. So this is in these results and resources, you're going to see there's a lot of information, there's data, they're separated similarly by these different widgets and things that you can come. We're going to have policy recommendations, because again, this is a full suite of solutions as opposed to just build a project here. We recognize that it might take flood warning, it might take policy considerations, it might take green and gray and stormwater infrastructure. It might take transportation, redesigning roads and reimagining things. So all of this collectively together, working together to help solve this problem. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Dr. Amanda Schroeder, who's the Senior Service Hydrologist, the National Weather Service.
Good morning. So like you said, my name is Amanda Schroeder. I have been the Senior Service Hydrologist with the Fort Worth Forecast Office for about 5 years now. I've been in the Weather Service for 13, both as a meteorologist and a hydrologist. Some of this may be a review for you all, so I'm going to try to go through some of it fairly quickly. So when it comes to the hydro-related products that the Weather Service can provide, in your more extended part of the event before it actually starts, the Weather Prediction Center sends out an excessive rainfall outlook. If you're familiar with the Storm Prediction Center's convective outlook, it's very similar to that. This image, as an example, is not current, obviously, but that is issued up to 5 days prior to an event. And it'll give you a 1 through 5 categorical ranking of your flood risk based on the projected rainfall that's in the forecast within this time frame. Now, when you get closer to an event, we have both a flood watch and a flash flood watch. So several years ago, the Weather Service did an overhaul, if you will, of the flood products because, as you may remember, there were a plethora of them and they were rather confusing. So we try to simplify things. So most of the time, what you'll see from forecast offices now is going to be just a plain flood watch. So it's supposed to encompass both flash flooding, river flooding threats, those kinds of things. And that's issued up to 48 hours before an event. It's basically saying that your ingredients are there, that it could potentially be an issue, so watch out, basically. We do have a flash flood watch still in our arsenal that we can use, but here locally, we will only use those if there's a potential dam failure. So it would be very targeted for areas immediately downstream of a potential dam failure. So during an event, this again goes into our simplification. We have flood advisories. Those are issued to alert the public when you may have nuisance flooding, whether it's ponding on the roadway, those kinds of things. But then you go up from there and we have flash flood warnings. And those are going to be issued when it's more life-threatening. And again, like the flash flood watch, we still can have the ability to issue a flash flood warning immediately downstream of a potential dam failure. So that product is available for that as well. Now, when it comes to the flash flood warnings, back in the day, every single one of them would send out wireless emergency alerts. So any type of flash flood warning that was issued, whether, whatever, that would send off an alert to everyone's cell phones. In 2019, we changed that. And now, like the severe warnings, we have impact-based warning tags that can be attached to them. So what that essentially means is a base flash flood warning. It is still a warning. We still expect it to have the potential for life-threatening flooding, but it's not going to set off people's phones at 3 o'clock in the morning. We tried to kind of tier this essentially where you have catastrophic and considerable tags that can be added to it. A considerable tag is going to be a more severe type of flash flooding. You've got, potential swift water rescues and those kinds of things. The catastrophic is going to be geared more towards your flash flood emergency. Those haven't been issued in North Texas very often at all, but that's the kind of example of what was issued for the Kerr County event back in July. So those two types of tags, if it's put on a flash flood warning, is going to set off the WIA. And if you ever look at the text product, this is just a comparison of the severe warning statement and the flash flood warning statement, where these tags are actually located in the product itself, just at the bottom. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the actual warning decisions that we make when we're trying to decide, do we issue anything? Is it an advisory? Is it a flash flood warning? Do we need a tag for it? So some of the products that we're using, obviously, we're going to look at radar data, both base products and derived products. We do have access to a lot of products from the National Severe Storms Lab, including multi-radar Martellus sensor products, as well as hydrologic products. So we use that. But some of the bigger ones that play into this, we want to pull in rainfall observations. There are some sites that we have access to that we can get 1-minute data, which is amazing, all the way up to 5, 15, and hourly rainfall data. And we're using that just to compare what the radar is and the other products are showing and trying to calibrate that, because as you can imagine, there are some issues that can arise from using the rainfall data from the radar. So we're trying to get the ground truth, if you will. Like that, getting reports from our partners during an event is very, very important, not only because we trying to get feedback about, if the product type that we chose is accurate for what the impacts that are being viewed, but it can also help us calibrate ourselves when we're looking at the various data products to try and decide what type of warning should be issued, if anything at all. So those are very important. And then tying into this, some of the road networks that we have access to, the City of Fort Worth, City of Dallas, Grand Prairie, a lot of them have these available, and we have that data that we can access as well. So it's going to show us some of the areas that are already starting to flood, whether it's approaching the roadway or it's actually flooded that particular roadway. So we have ways that we can access that, but having more data like that during an event is super helpful. So the actual flood report, some of the things that we need, most importantly, would be the impacts. You know, is our structures flooded? Is the roadway flooded? Is it impassable? Is the water flowing when you're talking about the flood magnitude? Or is it stagnant? And then the frequency, is this a place that floods all the time and it's, you know, it is what it is? Or is this something that's a little more nuanced? So all of that information is very important to us. We can still use it after an event has passed, but it's most beneficial. You get the most bang for your buck when that's provided during an event itself. So what actually happens to the report when you send this to us? So a local storm report is generated, which we use to verify the warning, obviously. But we're also using that information to add detail to the warning text. And then going on, like I said earlier, we can use that to help calibrate ourselves with the data that we're looking at. Because, you know, rainfall is oftentimes a benign event. And it's not just what's falling from the sky that we have to be concerned about, it's what happens on the ground. If you're doing an analysis for a severe storm, there are very clear signatures about what a hail core looks like, and you're expecting what that's going to happen, what's going to reach the ground. But when it comes to hydrology and flash flood forecasting and warning operations, it's a little more complicated, because if, you know, you get an inch of rain and it's pretty dry and it's, you know, fairly even, you may not get anything. But if you get an inch of rain and it's May 2015 and it's already been flooding for days and days and days, that you can't just look at the base value of what the radar is telling you. You have to look at what's going on at the surface. So it's a little more complicated. So getting our ground truth from our partners is super important. Now, transitioning over to the river flood products that we offer. So we have river flood warnings, and those are going to be essentially forecasting your flood potential at a certain river reach, a certain river reach around known forecast points. And those are categorized as minor, moderate, and major. You can see that delineated in the hydrograph there. And one thing to remember too is that reservoir releases are going to be included in these products. It goes out 5 days. Lastly, though, forecast rainfall is included in this, whereas that's not the case for your flash flood warnings. With the river flood warnings, typically it's within 24 hours, a 24-hour rainfall forecast is included. But for example, when we were dealing with Hurricane Harvey, we went out to 72 hours and included 3 days worth of rainfall, because we were very sure where it was going to fall and the magnitude of that QPF. As you can imagine, that's not always the case in Texas, which is why it's typically just 24 hours of rainfall forecast that goes into this, because if you're off by 20 miles, it could be a completely different basin, and then you busted the forecast. So that's the reason for that difference. Now, switching into flood inundation maps, the National Weather Service has been working on this for quite a while, basically trying to take the traditional hydrograph and put it into map form, putting water on a map, because we want to improve risk communication. So some of the important things to remember with flood inundation maps is that these are only intended for river flooding. This is not going to be helpful for your flash flood events, your urban flooding, overland flow, that kind of thing. They're geared specifically for rivers and creeks and streams. We have depth maps and extent maps. Obviously, depth maps are going to show extent and how deep the water is, and extent maps are not. They're only going to show you whether it's wet there or whether it isn't. So the National Weather Service, a lot of our products are dynamic. So those are going to be, they have different map options, and those are updated during an event itself. So they're taking current observations and current forecasts for that event specifically. And then the accuracy and the usefulness, they're all going to vary among the different maps because they're all developed slightly differently. But there are multiple agencies that are involved with this, and the USGS will talk about their piece in just a minute. From the Weather Service, our capabilities, we've got static maps and dynamic maps. So static maps are going to be your map libraries where you can go look at it ahead of time. They're a lot more complicated as far as the modeling that goes into them. And then you have the dynamic maps that I mentioned from the National Water Center that the Weather Service has available. And those have more simplified hydrologic modeling frameworks that go into it. But like I said, they are using the current observations for the events that you are currently in. We do also go out and do field surveys. So this is actually a screen capture using the same software that we use after going on tornado surveys. We have that available for flooding as well. So one of the things that we're doing with this, if we have a major event come through, we're going through to these areas along the river to try and get more detailed information so that we can update those flood inundation maps and do improvements that way. So I'll leave this up here real quick, but these are just some of the contacts and the websites that are available to help. My information is listed up on the top left, and then you have the River Forecast Center, which is actually where the forecast comes from for those hydrographs that I showed you. They essentially, they're work in the background, send that information to the Weather Forecast Office. We QC it, send it out as a product so that we're the public-facing entity for the Weather Service. And then the national page, the ERO, and then Inform is all that stuff there too. But that's all I have.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Christine Blickenstaff. I am the branch chief of the Integrated Hydrology and Data Science branch within the USGS. We're part of the Oklahoma. Can everybody hear me okay? Sorry about that. We're part of the Oklahoma Texas Water Science Center. My office is right here in Fort Worth. But one of the things I'm here to talk about today is a conglomeration of federal agencies that combined nearly 10 years ago now, or actually over 10 years ago now. And yes, Jerry, that should make you feel old. I remember when we were first forming this, it was back in 2014. And the Corps of Engineers, USGS, National Weather Service, and FEMA got together and said, you know, we're all doing really cool science related to flooding. But we want to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts and that we're pushing our science dollars as far as we can by utilizing the expertise from each one of the individual agencies. So we just really wanted to make sure the right hand knew what the left hand was doing, and we had the best scientists and engineers working on it from the 4 agencies that we could get. So once again, that's Inform. If you go to infrm.us, or you just use any search engine to search Inform, it'll bring you right to it. Also, at the end of my little presentation, I have a QR code that will bring you there directly. So part of what we really wanted to do when we established Inform is we wanted to make sure that we were collaborating nationally, but empowering locally. So we wanted to make this beneficial for a small government agency, city, locality, but also make it something that could be duplicated across the US so that we could really advance the state of the science as far as we were able to. So once again, as I mentioned, that Inform website, that's infrm.us. We have a lot of really great web applications that you can launch from here. I'm sure most of you have heard of base level engineering that's coming out of FEMA as well as Texas Water Development Board. Where you can go to download those base level engineering models is our estimated base flood elevation viewer. You can see it. Oh, you can right there. So you can see my mouse right there. That's a report that comes straight out of that. So the base level engineering models are used to create flood inundation maps that can be explored within this web application. Or if you're a homeowner and you just want to know your own flood risk, you can pull a report on your exact location. Or if you're a city engineer, you can also download the model, interact with the model, and run the model for your own purposes. So it's really threefold, 3 distinct users. We also have what's called the WAVE, or the Watershed Hydrology Assessment Viewer. We combined with the Corps to create these really in-depth detailed studies on return periods for floods. And these are massive huge tomes of information. So rather than reading a 1,000-page report, which I know you guys all like to do for your nighttime reading, you can go in and interact with the data directly. You can look at the information on a gauge by gauge access, or you can look at it as the basin as a whole. So it's a really useful tool. It's launched from the exact same web page. But what I'm really going to focus on today is the Flood Decision Support Toolbox, or the FDST. Sorry, I'm losing my voice, so if it gets hard to hear me, just holler at me. So the Flood Decision Support Toolbox is really a one-stop shop for flood inundation mapping, where you can find the most detailed flood maps that are available at that location. We pull them in from different sources. One of the sources is we create pre-positioned flood inundation map libraries, so you can look at your scenario planning. So you can say, what if the big flood really does hit at this location? What would that look like for me? We also use it and can use it in a real-time event. So we pull in the forecast from the Weather Service and we look at what does that forecast look like on the ground today. So two key ways to use this. So once you get into the FDST, and at this point we have over 300 locations within the state of Texas that are available with pre-positioned flood inundation mapping libraries. If you click on one of those dots are the gauges themselves. It'll open up the flood inundation map, which is what you can see up there on the right. It is color-coded so that you, like this little drop-down menu right here, you can go and select the stage that you want to look at so that you can make evacuation plans for when that big one really does hit. You don't want to be trying to make those plans during an event. You want to go in there and create your scenarios. Once you have one of them open, it looks like this, and you can go ahead and click anywhere within the map area, and it'll pull up the estimated depth at that location. So, for example, this road right here, if you were trying to look at what that flood would look like here, and what we're at 37 feet at the gauge, it's estimated that it would be just over 5 feet at that location. So it's a really nice tool to understand where you're going to be able to evacuate and where you're not. So some of the really cool functionality within the FDST, this is what the control panel looks like over here. And you can go ahead and click on the hydrograph and it'll pop up the hydrograph at that gauge. You can see the blue line right here that I'm pointing at is the USGS gauge data that's pulled straight from our NWIS, which is our database collection. Then as you scroll over the hydrograph, if this were happening in real time, it would pull the associated flood inundation maps, or if there's not a forecast at the time, you'll just see the real-time gauge data. So that's what that would look like as you're going up over the hydrograph. You can also click on historical events and it'll pop up historical events in order of magnitude. So you can really see what if the big flood from May 30th on 2015 were to happen at this location, you click on that and you can see what it would look like on today's landscape. So it's going to be slightly different, obviously, because of the evolution of, folks moving in, as Jerry was talking about, and Matt as well. But on today's landscape, that's what it would look like. You can also sign up for a tool called WaterWatch. So if you click right here, WaterWatch is a great tool that you get to set what's important to you. So for example, if the flood that starts to matter to you happens at 27 feet, you can set that up so that you will either get a text or an email when that gauge hits that stage. And so that all right, I need to start paying attention to this. I might need to enact my evacuation plans. So it's a really nice feature. Just a little forewarning here. Do not set it too low. So if you set it at 5 feet, you're getting a text like every 5 minutes, right? That it's going to hit 5 feet quite often. So this was the federal partnership that we started in 2014 with Inform. Then some of the state agencies started coming to us. So for example, Texas Water Development Board came to us and said, hey, we've been wanting to do that for years. You guys have already invested so much science dollars into this, and we want to partner with you rather than recreating the wheel ourselves. And we said, great, but they were a little bit picky as partners and said, we want a bunch of extra functionality. And we said, okay, we can make that happen. So now we've created areas. So we started at Region 6. Now we've created subdivided areas that have different data sets. So for example, Texas wanted to be able to look at buildings and what that inundation looks like and what that might cost. So we worked with them to develop the data sets where they could do that. We also pulled in reservoir conditions. Now, when we're pulling in data sets from Texas Water Development Board, or if we're pulling something in from a river authority or the Weather Service, we do not want to create a new a copy of that data set. We want to pull it directly from them so that we're making sure we're always giving the same answer as the Weather Service. We're always giving the same answer as Texas Water Development Board. So for these reservoir conditions, Texas Water Development Board already had that data in a database. We just pulled them in here and visualize them. Now, part of the reason we need to do that in a flood tool is because if the reservoir is not full, obviously it's going to be able to absorb some of that flooding coming downstream, and it'll help you make more informed decisions. And then, as I mentioned, we pulled in critical infrastructure. So you can see right here these buildings that have turned red in this inundation scenario. That means that they're going to be inundated. That means you're going to need to evacuate them. If they're yellow or green, you can make a decision on whether or not you need to evacuate them, depending on the risk that is associated with that building. We also pulled in the driving conditions straight from TxDOT. So when you're making your evacuation plan, you can say, all right, I want to send people to this hospital. These blue dots are hospitals, but I don't want to send them on a certain road because there's construction there and it's going to make a bottleneck. So it'll really help with your evacuation planning. Sorry. You can also, so once you turn the buildings on, that's you do it right here in this circle, you can see them light up and you can see how inundated they're going to be. You can click on them and it'll get an exact number. But you can also turn on different layers and pull different reports that help you visualize what that might cost. So if this flood were to happen, this report shows you how many buildings will be inundated, what types of buildings those are, and also what the estimated damages that will occur during that scenario. So this individual report has a static URL. So if you want to share it with a cooperator or a homeowner or a fellow coworker, you can just copy the link and send it directly to them, and they're looking at the exact same report you are. Now, I know that we don't want to get into too much detail on this here, but I feel like it would be a failure on my part if I didn't talk a little bit about uncertainty. So with these flood inundation maps, the gauged location, you're going to have the highest level of certainty that you can, meaning that you're going to be pretty sure that your flood inundation map is accurate. The further you get from the gauge, it does have more uncertainty associated with it. And so it doesn't mean you shouldn't trust it, but there is going to be times when it won't be exactly perfect, but it's still going to be the best information available, and it's still going to help you make informed decisions. Now, within the FDST, we do have different tiers of modeling that were used to create the flood inundation maps, so that also contributes to your uncertainty. So, for example, a tier A would be an engineering scale model. It's going to have the highest accuracy that you can get in order to understand what the flood inundation map is going to look like. A tier B is those flood inundation models I mentioned before, the base level engineering models. They're very nearly an engineering scale model, but they don't have the inline structures. So they're going to have a little bit more uncertainty associated with it. And then we have the information that's coming in from the Weather Service, which is coming from the National Water Model, which is that tier C. So it has higher uncertainty, but it's still really valuable. And especially if that's all you have there, it's going to be really useful for you when you're making those decisions. And we wanted to make sure that when you come to the Flood Decision Support Toolbox, all of those are available to you, but we're only showing you the ones that are the most reliable at that location. So we also pull in the National Weather Service FIMS. As Dr. Schroeder had mentioned, they only have extents. They don't have depth grids associated with them, but it's still that one-stop shop where you can visualize both of them. And if you have a higher accuracy product available, you can go ahead and go to that rather than the lower accuracy. So once again, this is the QR code that'll take you directly to the Inform website. At the bottom of the website, there's also a link that the email comes directly to me, as well as a few other folks within USGS. And you can provide feedback, you can ask for information. If you just need a guided tour of how to use the tool, we're available to do that for you. So please go and explore some of our other web applications from there as well. And if you have any questions, this is my contact information, and I'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. And so we've got sort of a perspective on from the federal side and then some of the information, the data that's out there, and sort of tools that you already can leverage that are already publicly available. What we wanted to do with this next presenter, Dr. Nick Feng with the Water Engineering Research Center at UTA, is give a local perspective. He'll talk a little bit more about what an operational system actually looks like, and give some of that additional sort of hands-on, real-world application perspective. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Nick Feng.
Good morning, everyone. I'm the director of a Water Engineering Research Center, just kind of established 2 years ago. And our center actually really known for developing flood early warning system for many, many years. I want to actually start out a simple scheme of the flood warning system, how it actually really works and what are typical the components of this, the flood warning system itself. So typically, I mean, people like to call flood alert system, FEWS, or flood early warning system, FEWS, all fast right there too. And that usually has about 3 different components. The first one is a data collection component, and that really kind of collect the rainfall data, or from different sources, gauges, radar, and/or satellite as well. But meanwhile, you also have a collection piece from a stream gauge record there as well. So once you have the data itself and moving into the middle part, which is really the core engine of the system itself, that has a hydrological model that digests the information and also give you the real-time feedback. Typically, it could be a time series stage information or the flow information there as well. And given the past 5-6 years, machine learning and data-driven is becoming very popular. And if you have a very dense gauge network and a long history of the data itself, you actually can sort out, particular information using the data and machine learning method itself that give you this. Move on to the second one right there, is a decision support system. As Christine mentioned, the decision making is very, very important. So once you have information, as said, or the model, always there's a weakness. But there's a useful part in it. So decision support system is really kind of sort out and evaluate all different scenarios and sort out the useful piece and follow dispatch to the emergency personnel or the decision maker there as well. So communication is very important. How are you going to dispatch information to the effective related people? That's the last module on the right-hand side. So that's a typical the FEWS system. You have 3 major components right there, and we mainly on every 3 pieces. You need to really put in effort and to really build out a sound flood warning system. So one of the first system we developed, I personally developed, that was really from 2003. That was 23 years ago. That system was set up for the Texas Medical Center. That was the largest medical center in the world in Houston area. And when the time I was right, so we started out this operational flood early warning system using radar. That was the first time using NextRad radar rainfall data as well. So using the radar data and put it into hydrological model. Back then was HEC1. It's HMS beforehand. And so the radar actually being fed into the HMS data and generates, the second module right here, you can see you have a series of a floodplain map library. All the maps have been put in library right there as well. So those are maps actually is a very good visualized information because most of the public people cannot really understand the meaning of a hydrograph. And you have a visualized information is very critical. And those information be kind of fed into a very good layout decision-making format combined with the rainfall, and finally give a red on the right-hand side. We typically use 4 different levels alert level. Green is good, yellow is kind of you starting to stand by, orange you say, hey, you really need to take some action, so red is really bad. So that system the system was really customized for the medical center. Is a very boutique area, is a targeted area. So the model was developed very well, focused for this medical center area. So that really show an example. If you have a good hydraulic model, you have a good radar rainfall data, you'll be able to provide something very timing, in terms of timing, very good, about 2 hours of lead time. So any flood warning system, you want to have 2 different pieces of information you really want to grab. One is the timing, when the prediction, when the peak is going to happen. The timing is very important. And the second one is the magnitude, how high will be. Those are the information you really need to kind of grab and provide and to finally give a decision making makers right there too. So that is a first system. We started off from Houston area. The one I want to really talk about today here is the local flood warning system we built for the DFW International Airport. So the system itself, you can see down below, there's a map. I mean, we built up for Bear Creek. So Bear Creek has many different cities right there. I mean, you name it, Bedford, Euless, Colleyville, Keller, and South Lake some piece, and Grapevine as well. Has many different cities. And obviously, I mean, that there's over the years, lots of runoff being generated because of rapid development going on. And the DFW, I mean, is really sitting in the downstream of the watershed itself. So they've been actually seeing a lot of erosion issues these days. I mean, that erosion issues and or the flood issue there too, because if you have a large amount of rainfall coming in, the runoff going to be generated and really hitting on their property. They want to really use a very good radar-based flood warning system set up for those 5 or 6 different watch points downstream within the airport property right there. So we utilize a very good radar rainfall data from Weather Service. I mean, Christine, I mean, I highly recommend we have a couple more USGS gauges to be installed inside the watershed. Right now, there's only one, which is downstream of the watershed itself. And those watch points are going to be really important to calibrate, I mean, hydrologic, hydraulic model itself. Secondly, here is to monitor the over the time this watershed, I mean, evolution, because the land development happens and the rainfall also, the weather system happens itself. So how we got to monitor urban watershed? I mean, this is one of very vital watersheds. I mean, in this the TSI study area itself. So using this particular system, we actually been really demonstrating using MRMS data. I mean, I think most people sitting here understand multi-radar, multi-sensor data has a very, very refined resolution, 1 by 1 kilometer. For any kind of urban watershed, you want to use a high-res, I mean, radar data. So those data actually be over the year, we noticed, I mean, it's been kind of highly calibrated, but we still be able to use a local rain gauge data we call it reinforce the accuracy of the data itself. So once the data being calibrated and validated, we put it into the hydrological model itself in real time, and the model itself will generate the time series radar rainfall data, hydrograph for us. So you can see on the right-hand side is a demonstration, because one of the things that we want to share the experience right here is the loss has a big component in terms of uncertainty in your simulation, because in Dallas-Fort Worth region, the soil component is very complex, and any kind of a soil actually take up 30 or 40% of a loss in the hydrological model itself. So you need to really take it into the loss as a major factor as contributing to the uncertainty into the real-time flood warning system. So what you see right there, we typically give an envelope of this particular, I mean, it's uncertainty right there. If you have a low loss and have a high loss, you have a hydrograph really showing right there as well. So those are kind of things we actually want to really give people, hey, we factor the uncertainty into the real-time operation, and that is really the good tool for any urban watersheds. I mean, another thing here is the high-res radar rainfall is very important, because you do want to address very refined area. What's the flood situation for there? The better radar rainfall data is always a must these days. I want to also share a little bit more. I mean, we're the group actually developed the first flood early warning system technical guidance. I mean, in 2023. I really want to tip hat to these to Western consultants. I mean, you guys did an alternative fuel system guidance that was recently released by the TWDB. So before 2020. That was no Texas version FUSE guidance document at all. So the TWDB actually really kind of approached us, say, can we actually make a version for Texas? And so we provided a roadmap how a flood early warning system should be developed. And this is the kind of PIs on this, really on this particular team. Myself, Phil Bedient, Sam Brody from 8M, and my former colleague, Michael Zareski. So the guidance guidance document really was developed based on the community feedback as a first baseline, because you want to understand what the communities in Texas really want. And they're really the best practice management. I mean, that's also is very good lessons to learn. We actually collect those information and put it into this FEWS guidance document, and we share with the state. So that actually is a starting point for any communities. If they say, I want to develop a FEWS system, what gonna be involved right there? It's not about it, money, but also the experience and what you need to expect to really set yourself up right there too. So the system itself was really done very well. I mean, so most of the city, especially, I mean, communities in Texas these days, they are aware of such existence. I mean, to develop a flood early warning system for Texas. I want to also kind of, this is my last slide. I want to mention about many people know Inform, but also there's the academic council, I mean, behind it. And those are the people actually, really the researchers, the faculty, I mean, in Texas these days, really be part of this Inform academic council. So each one you see on the right-hand side has their own expertise. So Inform academic council actually collects, I mean, so all their expertise to address the flood-related issue itself. And one of the things here is during the Senate, the state public hearing, I mean, July the 31st in Kerrview, and 3 of the Inform academic council members were invited right there. Myself was I was there, and Phil Beaton and John Nelson Gammon, state climatologist, was involved to address these critical issue for Texas itself. So I want to just kind of leave right there. And currently, I mean, we're working with Texas Tech and to really bring up these Texas weather measurements, I mean, and a flood prediction system for the state. That is a part of a SB5 effort. And so we right now just kind of get it started and to work with Texas Tech and the Rice University to generate a flood warning system for Hill Country area as well. So I just want to kind of give you guys a kind of little bit flavor. What flood early warning typically look like, and what's the components inside of it, and also the study based off of flood warning systems already here is being operating. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Feng. And so I guess just to kind of bring that all together, so that's a lot of information, obviously, from a lot of different groups. And I think what TSI, again, has the opportunity to do is to take all of that information, not duplicate the efforts, but basically pull out the key, so if there's information from the flood decision support toolbox that can be leveraged in that very robust flood inundation mapping, or from the National Weather Service and those FEM maps. If there's pieces of those information or an existing flood warning system your community already has, or in the case of the DFW airport, that we're not recreating or duplicating anything with what we're doing with TSI. We're trying to say, if you want something, let's implement it. Let's give you the tools and resources. Let's show you all this information that's already there through this master plan concept. If you already have something, let's enhance what's already there. And let's try to make this as unified as possible, because I think what we run into in today's day and age is, in some cases, too much information. And we figure out, like, what do we do with all that? I'm overwhelmed by the amount of it. And so what our next presenter is going to talk about is the actual TSI flood warning system, SOP and master plan that's being developed to bring all that information, that state level FEWS guide, or the alternative FEWS guide that Dr. Feng mentioned. How are those relevant to our local region, to our local problem, to our local concerns? And so we recognize that, just as we've seen a lot of different presenters, no single entity can solve this alone. FEWS fits into this concept of TSI, like I mentioned before, where it's one tool in our toolbox that's an essential critical component from an alerts perspective, a warning perspective. The program, or the just for y'all's reference, we're currently working through this different. We've developed an initial SOP. We've got the components that go into the master plan: objectives, analysis, characteristics, capacity, gap analysis, things like that. We're taking all of those, creating individual memos that Dr. Dave Curtis will talk about in just a minute, and we're putting those into a comprehensive master plan. That's going to be something available for sometime this summer for y'all to review a final draft of. So again, check out the TSI website and keep track of that, but we'll definitely be alerting y'all to that in the very near future. With that, I wanted to turn it over to Dr. Dave Curtis from West Consultants. He's going to give the overview of what this TSI component of flood warning looks like. So Dr. Curtis.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for sitting in on this session. Matt, did you give me control?
You should have control. Let's see if that
Okay.
works. Otherwise, I can advance for you.
I don't have it. There we go. Let me get back. Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about flood early warning systems, particularly at the master planning level. I like to use the concept of end-to-end systems. And it's a concept that's been developed by the World Meteorological Organization and used around the world to help guide master plan development and the implementation of flood warning systems, and particularly flash flood warning systems. And I've used this model pretty much throughout my career. And it's basically a link of interconnected elements, starting with data collection and monitoring. You have modeling and forecasting, warning dissemination, decision support, and response to the warnings themselves. Data collection is kind of that first mile of the system where it's the first element that you really pay attention to. And that is developing an acute situational awareness of not only what the long-term flood risks are in your community, but getting the information that you need to kind of develop a sense of what's going to happen in the near future. Amanda from the Weather Service talked about some of the early products they have and the outlooks. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about. You know, 4 or 5, 6 days out, is there a potential for severe weather? Then you get into the modeling and forecasting. Nick talked about that in terms of the models to actually take the rainfall information and turn it into something useful, like a flood hydrograph. Then you have to figure out how to get that warning out to people. Once the warning's out, there's some sort of decision support that's necessary. All right, so I've got this warning. Now what do I do with it? What are the potential impacts I have to worry about? And then the last element in the last mile, essentially the response to warnings. All of that stuff that happens before that really doesn't matter unless the community is doing the right thing at the right time to mitigate the potential damage that might occur in a flood. All right. When you're dealing with flood warnings and flood forecast, it's a different mindset than a traditional engineering analysis. I've heard the word accuracy a number of times used by the presenters before. One element that hasn't been talked about a lot is timeliness. So we all like to have the most accurate forecast possible, no question. However, to get an accurate forecast, you generally have to wait and get enough data so that you can make an accurate forecast. By the time you've collected enough data to do that, the flood's come and gone, especially in a rapidly responding hydrologic environment like an urban area in the 12 counties in NTC-COG area. The timeliness element of it is you have to get information out in time for people to take action. So there's this constant tension, and accuracy and timeliness are essentially incompatible. If I wait long enough to collect enough data to be accurate, I sacrifice timeliness. If I give a forecast out in plenty of time to make decisions, it may not be accurate enough to have the credibility that people are confident that they're taking the right actions. So there's some balance in the middle that is kind of get the best combination of accuracy and timeliness to make the forecast most valuable. I like to say that if you're in the business of making forecasts, you're in the business of making life and death decisions before you know all the facts. But you have to get information out in a timely fashion, and that is often before you know all the facts. Now, one of the things that Matt mentioned was this master plan, and we call that our roadmap to success. The primary purpose of the master plan is to kind of kickstart the flood early warning system development. And we also want to make it a template that is fully transferable to, get a little ahead of myself here, to not only all the communities within the NCT-COG area, but throughout the state of Texas. Now, the first thing that we've developed is something called a standard operating procedure, referred to as SOP. It's actually a step-by-step document to kind of help you manage your way through the process and ask all the right questions. The very first thing you have to do is kind of define your organization. You know, who's in charge of the flood warning system? Who's in charge of the operations, the maintenance, the planning? Do you have people that are in charge of grant applications or accounting? There's all these different elements, almost like a mini business, that you have to think about. And so this is not adding anything new to what you already do. It's basically just recognizing that they exist and kind of putting it on paper. This is the stage where you're also identifying the outcomes. What are the things that you want out of your flood warning system? What are the expectations? What are you trying to achieve? What are your goals and aspirations for the system? The second element is understanding the regional characteristics. What's the topography? What are your political boundaries? What are your population distributions among the various entities within the area? What's the ground cover? What's the land use like? What is the hydrologic response? Just understanding those physical elements that drive the hydrology and the flood risk in your region. The next thing is the capacity analysis, and that's basically doing an inventory of all of the resources that are available in the region that could support a flood warning system. That includes who's operating rain gauges, what kind are they, how do they communicate, where are the stream gauges, where are they, how often do they communicate, what kind of information do they provide. What are the data management systems? Where is all that data going? Is it collected in a common central portal, or is it dispersed through a number of different entities? And as we mentioned earlier, very difficult to consolidate to make any sort of briefing reports or understand what's happening in the aggregate for the community. Once you've identified the regional characteristics and the capacity, and you've basically established the goals that you want to achieve, then you have to look at, okay, where are the holes in this? Where are the gaps that need to be filled? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? Once that's done, then you can basically figure out, okay, I know what my goals are. I know where the gaps are. How do I go about filling it and set up a plan to do that? The first element is the objectives analysis, and that's basically to document the goals that you want in the system. What is your vision for it? And what are your expectations for the region? So the memo in this case is going to include information from a survey that was taken in April of 2025, one done earlier in January of this year, a workshop that was held earlier, some community visits, engagement in a master plan process, and examples of master plans that have been done in Texas. Now, the survey results were kind of interesting. In January of this year, there was pretty much a universal acknowledgement that early flood warning systems would be beneficial to the region. But the respondents consistently prioritized timely, actionable, and impact-based information over raw data. So, yeah, it's one thing to know it rained 3 inches in the last hour, but what does that actually mean? What is that impact, and how do I deal with it? How do I address it? And what kind of response does that drive in my community? Another really key element that came out of these surveys is the importance of that last mile idea that we talked about in an earlier slide. How do you get the community to do the right thing at the right time? This is really the biggest challenge of the whole process. We heard talk about game-changing technologies, for example. Those kinds of things have typically occurred in data monitoring and modeling. The other elements, what we're talking about, until you get to the fast, they're showstoppers. If they're not working right, all the good information that's coming out of the first two elements in our chain, it really almost doesn't matter, because it's not going to be effective until you get the outreach, until you get the community response right. In the regional characteristics memo that's being created, going to have the key information that kind of defines what the region looks like. And that's your political boundaries and the climate and natural environment, and how does your watershed respond? So you might include tables and actual data and information. Here we've identified population. And in this case, we've taken a look at, well, where in this region are you most vulnerable to a 100-year flood, for example? Generally, you're going to be near some sort of water course, and the green shading gives you an idea of where those risk factors are. The yellow dots are critical facilities, could be police stations, hospitals, emergency centers, nursing homes, and so on. And the green squares are low water crossings. All these are risk associated. In the capacity analysis, this is where we're basically inventorying what's available. And that includes, well, the hardware that could be used in a flood early warning system, the software that's being used, and how the systems are being operated. So you may end up with a set of tables. You have entities like Fort Worth and Grand Prairie and so on, Weather Service. Lots of people have gauges that can be accessed. You may have rain, you may have stage gauges, rain and stage gauge in combination. You may have weather sensors, and then you have a communication system. So how are those individual gauging locations reporting their data? A really important element is the frequency of data reporting. So not all gauges that are out there, and there are a lot of hydrometeorological gauges in the region, but they're not all appropriate to support a flash flood warning system. They might be useful for flood verification, but they're not necessarily timely enough to get information out so that people can actually respond. So in that column on the left where reporting frequency, the ones that are green, you can generally see that the reporting intervals are 15 minutes or less. That's really what you need in the DFW area to support a flood warning system. Well, Grand Prairie is in yellow. Right now we look at that and it says reports every 2 minutes to an hour. Well, what does that mean? You know, is that an adaptive reporting scheme? Do we truly get 2 minutes during the storm, or does something have to happen in order to trigger it to go from an hour down to every 2 minutes? So understanding that kind of mechanism is important. And we have to basically understand when it gets to 2 minute reporting before we turn that cell green. Weather Service has a lot of data out there that reports hourly. Well, you know, if you get 3 inches of rain in an hour and I don't get the report till the end of the hour, that's not really very beneficial for a flash flood warning system, particularly in an urban environment with lots of impervious area. So we have to basically examine the data that's out there. Can we get it? Can we get it to a site that data can be integrated? And is it interoperable with the various decision-making systems in the community? So the gap analysis, well, we basically, when you get to this point in the master planning, we've defined where we are. You know, we've looked at our resources, we know what the regional characteristics are. And earlier, we defined the goals and where we want to be. So what we need to do then is, okay, figure out what goes on in the middle. And so in our standard operating procedure, we have scads of questions that we can actually ask. And so identifying the flood risk, what are roles and responsibilities of stakeholders and so on. Basically, it's a very detailed guide that you can answer, and it might look intimidated just with the number of questions that are asked, but it's really not any different than information that you're already dealing with. And it really is a good tool that everybody can use to kind of refine and make the system your own. Then once you get find out where the weak spots are, then the next question is, how do I improve on that? So we basically then, each step of the way, the threat detection, what needs to improve there? Do I need more rain gauges? Do I need better spatial distribution of the gauges? What's the modeling and forecasting? You know, is that appropriate for what we're dealing with in any community within the region? How do we improve the warning and disseminations that come out of this? What kind of decision support improvements do we need? And how do we improve the community response? Do we need better education, public outreach? You know, I use a term frequently called unrelenting outreach to keep the community engaged and informed. And as I mentioned earlier, the threat detection and modeling and forecasting, in terms of technology, this is where the game changers tend to be. But these last three, these are where the showstoppers crop up that can basically mitigate the potential benefits that are derived from the first couple of items. So generally, in most flood warning systems, warning dissemination, decision support, and response to the warning are the weak spots that need to be shored up. So in going through this process, a series of memos are created. One, there's a memo that basically defines the objectives. Then you have a memo from the regional characteristics, capacity analysis results, the gap analysis to figure out, okay, what do we need to fix? And then the improvement strategies. There's the last element that's not part of our current scope, which is an actual implementation plan. So it takes all the information that you basically strategized in the memo and put it into kind of a plan of action. So each one of these memos are done kind of independently, but the whole process is designed that they can be knitted together in a comprehensive master plan to support the development of flood early warning systems in the region. Okay, turn it back to Matt.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Advances here, sorry. No, you're good. Just gonna go. I think yeah, so what I think Dave talked about is critical to talk about, you know, from the first mile all the way to that last mile, understanding along the way what's needed. And so I think the understanding that there's all this information out there. You saw some examples of what we've done in terms of the research locally to be able to provide a comprehensive solution. I think in terms of advancing that to the next step, that's some of the things that we want to talk about in closing, you know, as we move towards the end of this workshop and really open it up for discussion, is if that information is put out there, that last kind of gray area that we talked about, that implementation plan, is the execution of that. There already are projects in the works, including ones that are already funded and, you know, soon to kick off. One example, I know we've got Nathan Drozd from the NCT COG here today, and we also, you know, Claire from Dewberry Engineers. The Flooded Roads Information System project with NCT COG is one example of the implementation of these types of concepts. And so that project, without going into a lot of detail, is really intended to to do something that's truly operational. So TSI is more of a planning project. It's providing those tools and resources that lead to, in terms of mitigation projects, things that are go into the state and regional flood plan. So actual projects that can be implemented beyond this, policy considerations that can be adopted, things like that. The flooded roads project is going to be the actual implementation and provide you all, in terms specific to roadways and roadway infrastructure, what are the susceptible and vulnerable areas. And so that implementation piece is critical. But I think the planning information is only as good as the people that end up using that information or not using it. So we've all been involved in those things that, you develop this great project or this concept or things like that, and it sits on a shelf or it sits in your, hard drive or whatever else. So we're trying to really get local ambassadors that buy into this concept and think collectively. We've gotten good feedback that TSI is a good idea. The integration of transportation, stormwater infrastructure, all this stuff is a good idea. But the next step is the actual implementation. So we did want to take a minute to pause to see if there's folks that want to provide a local perspective on this that we may have either missed or just some things to consider as we move forward with this. We can, if you online and you want to raise your hand, we can go ahead and call on you. Or if there's specific questions in the audience here that wanted to, or comments that we wanted to address, feel free to raise your hand. We can have that discussion now. There'll be a little bit more interactive Q&A portion just in a minute here, but really wanted to see if there's any local input that folks have, especially related to those that either are consuming the information from an emergency management perspective, or maybe more from an operational standpoint, from a flood warning perspective. So I'll pause for a minute just to see. All right, so then I was kind of anticipating that. Because as my daughters would say, that's too much information, Dad. So we'll go ahead and kick it off with some questions here, and hopefully, if there's not a lot of response, hopefully some of our team members here from the TSI team can weigh in on some of these. So in the DFW area, most of us live in this region. Those online, a lot of you all do as well. But I would say, where do you think are the biggest flood risk blind spots that we're seeing in our specific communities? So that could be geographic areas, vulnerable population, infrastructure gaps. So I'll start with one that we're seeing, and one that's been expressed by the transportation department several times is they'll build a specific road. The guidance criteria saying current conditions, which may be based on hydrologic or hydraulic information that even if it's regulatory, it might be 20 years out of date. That's the reality of what we're dealing with. And so when that happens, that roadway may start overtopping, 5 years after it's built. Well, why is that? So I think understanding, as Jerry mentioned earlier, the fact that this is a system-wide flooding is a system-wide issue. How can we also then mitigate it systematically from a system-wide perspective? And so I think that's one vulnerable area that I've seen sort of play out. Tanya, did you want to add?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm an emergency management coordinator, and I'm not sure how many other ones. I'm not recognizing a lot of the names that are on this list, but I provide, the emergency management community provides outdoor warning or alert notification or warning to the public when there are severe weather, flood emergencies and that sort of thing. And so I think some of the challenges that we're going to have is we have lots of communities in this west area as a part of this project that operate outdoor warning that can be used to provide warning to the community. But as you saw in Kirk County and others, is that the challenge is when you're sounding sirens is what does this mean? It's going to go back to public education on when you hear the siren, does that mean for tornadoes or severe weather as we're wanting the community to go inside, lowest level, away from walls or windows, and turning on their TV or radio and find out exactly what the hazard is so they can make operational decisions on behalf of their family to keep themselves safe. But when you're talking about flood emergencies or flood, when you're activating outdoor warning sirens, is how do you tell other than emergency notification systems, which is another alert and warning system, which is different than an outdoor warning siren system on that communication, either using text, voice, or email, however the consumer wants to receive that information. And then also incorporating, there's a lot of jurisdictions that utilize FEMA's IPAWS, which is the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, to send out information, because most emergency notification systems, you have to sign up for them to receive the information. Well, I know, for, at least in my 20+ year career here in the North Central Texas area, is that the general public does not sign up for those. I would say probably 20% of a community may sign up for emergency notifications through their local city or county. So the challenge is, how do we integrate all of these outdoor warning siren systems to include emergency notification systems? So kind of going back to what Amanda Schroeder was saying as it relates to the WEA, the wireless emergency alerts, is they're going to receive that if they're located in the polygon for those specific threat areas. But I would encourage maybe Amanda Everly, who's also on this as a participant and a part of the North Central Texas Council of Governments Emergency Preparedness, is this going to warrant some future or some conversations with the emergency managers on how we can better integrate when you're talking about flooding and the utilization of all of these different emergency notification systems to make a flood emergency warning system.
Yeah, and that's really valuable feedback. And I don't know, Amanda Everly's here in the audience. I don't know if you want to add anything, or because I think a lot of that's just kind of duly noted, and we need to make sure we incorporate that in our master plan, our reporting, things like that, to make sure that key concern is being addressed. Because I mean, myself, I worked several years at FEMA, and I saw exactly, Tanya, what you're describing play out too many times, where we may have had the information, but they always say don't exchange business cards when it's raining outside. And so we didn't know that resource exists. We hadn't set up the alert on our phone. All of those things. So how can we kind of take all that, simplify it, and make it more usable? Dave, did you want to add?
Yeah, I want to thank Tanya for bringing that up, because obviously that's something that I've recognized in 50 years of doing flood warning systems. That last mile is absolutely critical. And some of the questions you raised about sirens, we had very detailed discussions in the development of the siren guide for the state with the Texas Water Development Board. Probably the toughest challenge that you're going to face as emergency managers, getting the word out. Where I've seen it work best is that it's a year-round effort, just unrelenting outreach and multiple channels. You need to use all the available channels that you have. Even when we developed the siren guide, yeah, it's a big, noisy outdoor warning system, but we emphasize that that's just one of the tools in the toolbox, that there has to be multiple channels to reach people. And I think that's true in just about every case. So you just kind of have to use all available channels. And I've seen social media work extremely well in many cases as well.
Yeah, it looks like we had another hand raised there.
Hey, this is Stoker Brown. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, good morning still, at least in the central time zone. Excellent presentation. Thanks for all that information and excellence going into developing those systems. My question, or just sort of something that we've have kind of seen in deploying similar flood warning systems. I'm in the Baton Rouge, Louisiana area. We were hit by some 2016 flooding, which really brought a lot of awareness to this area. But it's in the again, sort of that last stage of disseminating this information to the public so that it's actually usable and effective, and trying to have them understand the uncertainty that went into the information that got us to that last step. And one of the things I saw in the University of Austin's presentation was sort of the range of error bars. I think that was related to the amount of soil moisture content. And so I guess, David, maybe to you, doing this for 50 years, how have you seen to best communicate the uncertainty of that output to the public for decision-making purposes? And without losing confidence, without having the public lose confidence in it over time, seeing that maybe sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's not.
I think that continuous outreach and continuous education element is really critical, to keep talking about it and letting people know that, yeah, these aren't accurate all the time. In fact, they may never be totally accurate, but you need to be accurate enough to make and be reliable enough to make decent decisions. And I think that's really the standard. It's not that you're going to get to be within 1/100th of a foot. I've got lots of engineering colleagues that sweat bullets over getting a RAS model to the last 100th of a foot, but you never get there in a real-time environment because you have to get the information out before you have all the data. So and if you're upfront with people about that and continually to communicate that you're really trying to get information out in a timely fashion and understanding the difficulty in dealing with the uncertainty. One thing, though, I think the National Hurricane Center has done a great job of training us, because you have they have the cone of uncertainty around hurricanes. Being from Baton Rouge, you understand that pretty explicitly.
Absolutely.
And so we're trained already to begin to think about uncertainty. Don't focus on the center of that cone, but understand that the hurricane is big and bad and ugly and can exceed the boundaries of that cone. So
yeah, it's a great example. In my head, it's like trying to mimic that and getting to a spaghetti model of future potential flood depths, looking at sort of a Monte Carlo simulation of the many different rainfall forecasts from the meteorological models, and sort of putting in the different potential soil moisture contents and all that kind of stuff to sort of generate a similar plume.
And the thing is, if you're a recipient of those, then the question becomes, okay, how do I distill that to make a decision, to actually do something? And so, for example, you might have to identify, all right, the 75% of these ensembles or the members in that plume are going to be really bad for you. Being able to have at least that threshold, they can kind of begin to understand that and hone in on making a decision. If the mayor or the judge or the governor calls you up screaming in your ear, he wants a decision. How deep's the water going to be? He wants a number quite often, and doesn't have time to worry about the uncertainty. But that's just one of the challenges that we all have to deal with in the real-time element.
Yeah. Thanks again for the excellent work.
There's a couple of comments and questions online. Dwayne says, how can these tools be used to determine if discharge from 3AC development in our community can be detained, retained, and released at what rate, or just fully released without control? And William says, first suggestion, consider looking at existing downstream storm drain system capacities. Most right-of-ways can't handle 3AC full release. Usually this burden of proof is on the developers.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I know Jerry's, served a good chunk of his career at the Fort Worth Corps of Engineers, and I was most recently the chief of hydrology hydraulics there as well. And we saw specific to the question or concept of releases, saw that play out. And Jerry mentioned 2015 where those lakes filled up, those reservoirs filled up. And it took Jerry, about a year to drain all of those bathtubs down to normal pool levels. So yeah, I think that's an issue. One of the things though that it brings to bear is other considerations that are even beyond just it's the flood safety part of it. There's things like releases like that can bring a lot of sediment downstream, and we saw that play out in deposition into Lake Livingston and something like that with the extended period of those releases and the impact that has downstream. So there's a cause and effect to everything, but that's certainly something that's a good point. Jerry, did you want to add something?
Yeah, in our study, we're actually looking at that. And what we found is that just the impervious surface alone, the additional impervious cover is adding about 5 to 10% to the risk levels. So we would definitely encourage communities to look at detention associated with new developments. The other surprising result is we looked at what happens when we encroach into the floodplain, not the floodway, but the fringes of the floodplain, and we place fill there and we build our neighborhoods there as well. And that is a 25 to 30% impact on flood risk. So this study is going to give you concrete information that's actually within that footprint, showing what the impacts of development result in. And that will let your community make those policy decisions. Do we want to require detention? Do we want to protect those floodplain fringes? That information is coming out as part of this report.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. So for the sake of time, we'll go ahead and move sort of to this takeaways and next steps section. There is a brief survey that I'll leave up at the end of this that we ask you all to take. It's very quick. It's 5 short questions, and it gets into some of the other questions that we kind of glossed over here. I know Sue Alvarez is here. She's the director of NCTCOG's Environment and Development group, and her and I have talked in the past about how flood warning is as complicated as you want to make it, but it's also as simple as you want to make it. And so we want to make sure that we leave you with a message of each community is different, each problem set is different. And so we understand that, recognize that, and we want to help you all where you're at. So please don't get overwhelmed, especially if you're a small rural community that maybe doesn't have the capabilities that a larger community has, that we want to help equip you as to the full extent possible with the resources and tools that we're creating with this. Jerry, did you want to add something?
Yeah. One thing that would be very helpful to us is we've really given you a lot of information. I apologize for that. I think maybe sometimes we overwhelm with all the information. What we want to know is, what would you like to see our next step be? Do you want us to give you some time to ingest this and then come back together as a group that's less of us presenting information and more of you saying, well, we've ingested this and this is what we want? So what are the next steps you would like to see from us in terms of this specific project? Over.
Go ahead, Tanya.
Yes, sir. I think we're missing the boat on a lot of people that are not present for this meeting, and won't really know and understand, that this project is going on and how can we kind of socialize this within our professions, so we can then identify what the next steps need to be. From an alert and warning perspective, emergency management, we have a whole working group through the North Central Texas Council of Governments through emergency preparedness that can help address a lot of those issues. A lot of alert and warning systems are locally owned. They are not connected to other systems. And so you have a lot of silos when you're talking about alert and warning to the community. But then also, city engineers, floodplain administrators, I think we're missing quite a few individuals that are part of this project. Their jurisdictions are part of this project that need to weigh in and be able to provide some input so we can kind of move forward on identifying those next steps.
So I guess in terms of that, Tanya, because that's great feedback, are there specific working groups? And I know Amanda and the group here at the COG lead some of those. Are there specific groups that you think we should be plugged into? And if you have some of those, feel free to send them over. That would be great. Or other ideas related to that point.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the working group. So Amanda, for when you're talking about city engineers or floodplain administrators, is that part of a working group at COG that can help identify these flood-related issues? So when you're talking about identifying problem areas across the region and mapping those, the floodplain administrators for each of the communities could help identify those.
We don't have any of those within our emergency preparedness groups, but the environment development, Sue can probably speak on that more. They do.
Yes, we have a floodplain management task force. We also have a group related to the Common Vision program. Both groups are really focused on minimizing flooding and communication about those risks. I will say that we may fall into the category of, good to know, but kind of boring. And it's kind of like what Matt said. You don't want to be exchanging business cards during the storm. I am open to ideas on how to make what we're doing relative to flood emergency management more exciting so that more people will be involved before it starts raining. And we do have a webpage on the COG website on when our meetings are. I think we've got one coming up.
So beginning about 1990, we had a similar program to what TSI does on a smaller scale for the main stem of the Trinity River and the Elm Fork. And those programs, started off very similar to this, with not a lot of organization around them. And over time, that's where the Flood Management Task Force, the steering committee, some of those groups came out of that effort. And I guess what I'm saying here is you tell us, emergency managers and the communities out in this footprint, what we can establish to facilitate you guys coming to the table. There's been talk of expanding the Flood Management Task Force, expanding the Common Vision program into the TSI footprint. But really, we don't want to push things on you guys. We want you to tell us what you want and what you will respond to. Over.
Okay, so shameless plug here. The next meeting of the Trinity River Common Vision Flood Management Task Force is this Friday. Timely. It is virtual. You can get access to the link on our website.
Yeah, and Tanya, we've definitely done presentations at those different groups that have been referenced, and we've done a lot of these community site visits, things like that. But I think your point is duly noted of we need to. And I think Dave mentioned it too. The endless communication, like there is no limit to how much we should be engaging and how much we should be getting this information out there, and then actually taking in that feedback and utilizing.
And those meetings are just once a quarter. And I believe every other meeting is virtual. So it really is a minimal effort to plug yourself into that.
Yeah, thank you. I would say just in closing, we understand that flood risk is local. It's in some cases regional, the impacts of it. It's dynamic, that early warning only works when it actually triggers action. So I think that speaks to a lot of the points that have been raised today. Proactive integrated systems reduce the risk. And so that's the idea and why we're even, having this discussion. In terms of, the what's next, I think we want to make you aware of those resources we shared today. We want to engage with those different meetings, those different groups, the individual level all the way up to some of the larger audiences. We'll be giving a presentation on both flood warning system as well as the TSI project at the upcoming Texas Floodplain Managers Association conference. There's a lot of other groups like that we're trying to engage. So if you have ideas, please let us know. Please share with us, because we truly not just we need this to be collaborative. I live in this developing Western Metroplex. My kids, are going to be impacted by the decisions that we're making now. And so how can we collectively do better moving forward? Yeah, Dave, did you want to add something? Oh, you're muted.
Muted, Dave.
Just to keep plugging away at the unrelenting outreach. There's no substitute for it. Not everybody finds flood warning sexy, but if you get flooded, it sure is not very pleasant. And it's a lot better to be prepared than not. I mean, my experience in the Weather Service and forecasting years and years ago, people that are prepared ahead of time that get flooded have a much different response personally than if they were caught blindsided. So there's a lot of angry in getting caught blindsided by the potential by a flood. But at least if they know about it ahead of time and still get flooded, the reaction is night and day different.
Yeah, so I wanted to, and that's a great point, Dave, and thank you for that. I wanted to sort of in closing give the NCT COG folks the opportunity to share any final thoughts, including Sue, or Jeff or others that are on here. Also, if you can share, maybe Sue or others, a good point of contact to address any of these follow-on questions, conversations, so that we can keep this dialogue going, because this is extremely helpful. So yeah, Jeff or Stu, did you want to share some information on that and any closing thoughts?
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jeff Neal with the Transportation Department. I placed in the chat several of the other NCT COG committees that we've spoken to about this, knowing with the comment that was raised that this particular issue is pervasive among many other disciplines, many other things that communities, jurisdictions are having to be concerned with, and we're recognizing that. And so we're hoping that either through these committees or an additional meeting of this group, that we can continue to try to expand and highlight some of the work that needs to go into flood early warning system with the same kind of vigor and enhanced information that we're bringing into identifying new designs for infrastructure and other things that will aid flood mitigation as this area continues to rapidly develop. All of this is very much interconnected. We really appreciate everybody's attendance and feedback here today. And please don't stop. We want to continue hearing from you about all of this, given its great importance to the region.
Okay, I'll give my 2 cents worth. First of all, thank you to Aaron and Matt for pulling this together, along with Amanda and our other staff here at COG. Thank you to the folks that shared some of their pieces of the puzzle, because this is very much a multidisciplinary, agency, I guess, agenda piece. And for it to work together to help our communities, it works to know each other, and it works better when we work together. And so I appreciate everyone here today for being a part of this conversation. I would encourage, if you have ideas on other people that we're missing, other places that we should go so that we can do. I love the relentless outreach and engagement idea. I will gently pester everyone I can. Even the people I run with on Saturdays get lectures on flood proofing. So anyway, yeah, I was kind of appalled. There was an attorney that said, well, so what? It floods, people die. And I just had to walk away. I was really kind of, let's say I'm not going to be doing a lot of running with that guy. So understand that there are different approaches and different outlooks on flooding. As a registered engineer, I feel the pull to enhance public safety. And so I appreciate the work that you all do in that lane, because we're all working together towards the same end result, which is to reduce the impacts of flooding on our communities. So thank you for coming. Again, if you have other ideas or things that we should be considering, please let us know. I don't know if they have a slide with contacts on it at the end of this deck.
We do.
Or if you can just go to the TSI webpage, all of our contact stuff should be there. And we do talk together, we do share information together just about almost every day. So hitting any one of those folks on that slide will get to all of us eventually.
Yep. And
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. And there also is a bulk email for the TSI project, tsi@nctcog.org. So yeah, feel free to check that out. We'll make these slides available so you can have the contact information for the different folks that have spoken today. I think the only two that didn't actually speak today but were involved in what Dave was presenting are representatives from Freeze and Nichols with Jeremy, and Half Associates with Sam and Shrikar that's here today. But yeah, so this is kind of the group that was presenting. NCTCOG email address again is tsi@nctcog.org if you're interested in that. And I will just leave this survey up at the end here so that folks can have a chance to fill it out. It's extremely helpful, at least right now, to be able to gather that feedback, even some of those open-ended questions, just sharing your information or any other things that you think would be valuable for us to incorporate. We do read that, we do listen, we do integrate that. And as Dave mentioned, those are directly going to be in this master plan as part of that objectives analysis memo. Any final comments or questions before we close? Sure, Ramesh.
Hello, I wanted to offer us a comment and a suggestion for everyone online and also over here. As we complete the gap analysis, we spoke about the first mile, middle mile, and the last mile. And a lot of the emergency managers that are participating today obviously can speak to the last mile, having gone through several events in the Dallas-Fort Worth region. But the first mile and the middle mile are the engineers, and that represent various communities in our region. And they're not mostly, I guess they're mostly not represented here today. So really, in order to complete the gap analysis that Dave spoke about, we need to solicit information from the stormwater engineering departments and in various communities and counties, along with the last mile feedback that we're expecting from the emergency managers. Just a suggestion to kind of clarify how we can kind of put it all together.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I think that's, yeah, some of those working groups that we talked about are going to be instrumental in connecting those groups together. And I saw it play out so many times in the emergency management space in sort of my former job, where it was almost like that conversation, like it was like the jocks versus the nerds. It was like the engineers were these nerds that were like, I've got all this data and information, and then they put it on a viewer or a website or you know, somewhere, and they assume that the jocks or whatever know how to use it. The end user knows how to use it or is aware that it exists. And that's what drives me crazy, is that if there is information out there that can save a life, that can reduce the loss of property or damages, then we have a collective responsibility to make sure that that information is utilized and utilized properly. So I think it's incumbent on all of us. And I think, I don't know if Amanda, if you have anything to add on that. Okay. Yeah, so that's really just, I think a key takeaway. I definitely want to thank the COG for leading this effort, for trailblazing something that is not, it's complicated in a lot of the information we're talking about today. There's a lot of moving parts and things, but just getting it to this point, I would say is equally, if not more complicated, just the funding part of it, the nuances. And so really want to thank, you know, Aaron and Sue and Jeff and others for their relentless leadership on this effort. And hopefully this is something that really will create value for our communities moving forward. All right, with that, I will ask Erin if she's got any closing words or anything to wrap it up here.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. This information will be posted to the nctcog.org/TSI website in the next couple days. So with that, you all are free to go. Thank you for hanging with us. And thank you to all our speakers for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.